The Varnak Empire didn't fear much. For over 200 years, they swept through galaxies like fire through dry leaves. Planet after planet fell, civilizations collapsed, and resistance crumbled like old stone under their weight. Their ships were massive, living fortresses bred for war. Their soldiers, genetically engineered, stood twice the size of humans and had no word for mercy in their guttural language. They had never heard of Earth. Until they did. Humanity had just begun to stretch its fingers beyond the solar system. A few scattered colonies here and there, Mars, Europa, a mining outpost in Proxima Centauri. We weren't a threat. We were ants playing with rockets. But the Varnak had protocols. Eliminate before infestation, they called it. They didn't even send a fleet, just one war cruiser, the Runvak, and a small escort squad, enough to wipe out any new species and file a report. They were expecting another easy cleanse. Then came the Solace. Not the biggest ship. Not the most advanced. Hell, even back then it was running on half-patched software and an engine core older than some of its crew. But it had something the Varnak couldn't measure. Captain Elijah Rourke. They first encountered each other near the edge of the Gliesa system. The Varnak vessels dropped out of warp, their hulls black as void and bristling with weapons. The Solace was alone, stationed there for basic patrol duty, just eyes on the edge of human territory. Rourke didn't run. "Tell command we've got company," he said, calm as ever, lighting a cigarette in the command chair as red lights started flashing. "And prep everything we've got. We're holding this damn line." His officers looked at each other. "Captain, that's a Varnak cruiser. I know what it is," Rourke said, his voice steady. "You see another ship here ready to make a stand?" "No, sir." "Then it's us." The Solace launched every drone, armed every torpedo, and powered its main cannon, an old fusion lance that hadn't been used in 5 years. The crew braced. Everyone knew it was a suicide mission. Everyone except Rourke. Or maybe he knew and didn't care. The Varnak opened fire first. Blue plasma arcs tore through space, lighting up the void. Shields screamed under the pressure. One of the outer hull compartments burst into flame, and still Rourke barked orders like a man playing chess instead of facing death. "Divert power from the life support on Deck 4, he shouted. "I want those damn guns back online." He made every shot count. The Solace ducked, dodged, and struck back like a rabid animal. Smaller Varnak escorts were the first to go, caught off guard by the aggressive tactics. One exploded into a cloud of fire and debris. The other was crippled and drifted off into the black, its engines dead. Then it was just the Runvak and one human ship. Rourke stood up from his chair, watching the colossal cruiser loom on the screen. "Let's dance, you oversized lizard." The Runvak underestimated him. It moved in slow, steady, powerful. It wasn't built for quick kills. It expected fear, surrender, hopelessness. But Rourke didn't give them that. He gave them hell. The Solace rammed forward in a move no sane captain would have tried, slid under the Varnak's belly, and fired 2 torpedoes point blank at its undercarriage. The resulting explosion cracked through the Runvak's lower shield barrier, and for the first time in decades, a Varnak cruiser limped. Rourke grinned, blood on his forehead, sparks flying behind him. "Welcome to humanity, bastards." And out there, across the stars, as military channels lit up and desperate calls were made, one message repeated over and over: "The line is holding." The damage to the Runvak wasn't fatal, but it was humiliating. The Varnak didn't just conquer, they obliterated. Entire star systems had vanished under their iron grip. And yet here, at the edge of some forgotten system orbiting a yellow dwarf, one primitive ship had managed to tear through their armor. Not because it was stronger, but because it was angry. The Solace didn't retreat. It couldn't. The engines were overheating. The left stabilizer was half blown off, and 2 decks were without power. Medbay was filled with groaning bodies, and the lights flickered like the ship itself was gasping for breath. But Rourke stood tall in the middle of it all. His first officer, Lieutenant Vega, had a nasty burn across her cheek, and a makeshift sling around her arm, but her eyes were still sharp. "Captain, we need to retreat to Titan. We're running on fumes." "And if we go, they'll burn every colony between here and Earth," Rourke said, scanning the status screen. "They need time. We're gonna buy it." "How? With prayers and duct tape?" Rourke gave a tired smirk. "Prayers are optional. Duct tape's holding engineering together, actually." The crew laughed, a bitter, cracked sound. But it helped. They were soldiers, sure, trained to fight. But this? This was survival against a goddamn monster. And their captain, somehow, still had fight in him. The Runvak didn't make the same mistake twice. Its next assault came hard and precise. Plasma beams lanced toward the Solus with surgical accuracy. The shields flared white, then collapsed entirely. Hull breaches opened on decks 3 and 5. A firestorm devoured the lower cargo bay. 27 crew members lost their lives in an instant. Rourke didn't flinch. He marched to the tactical display and started plotting an intercept course. "They think we're dying," he said, half to himself. "Let's show them what dying humans can do." The Solus didn't fight back with strength. It fought back with desperation. Rourke ordered every last warhead in the arsenal prepped for close-range detonation. He turned the ship into a flying minefield. "They come too close," he told the gunnery chief. "Light 'em up. I want that cruiser to choke on our fury." When the Runvak moved in for the kill, expecting another easy demolition, it was met with wave after wave of shrapnel, molten debris, and kamikaze drones screaming across its flanks. It didn't stop the cruiser, but it slowed it. And in war, even a few minutes can change everything. Because while Rourke was holding the line, the rest of humanity was waking up. Earth's High Command received his last transmission, partially scrambled and glitching, but the message was clear. "We are not backing down. If this is our grave, we'll bury them with us." Those words hit Earth like a bolt of lightning. Civilian networks broadcast the message worldwide. Colonists on Mars, miners on Europa, freighter pilots and ex-Marines, everyone watched the lone ship standing against the impossible. Rourke wasn't just buying time. He was lighting a fire in the heart of a species. On the bridge of the Solus, Rourke wiped sweat from his brow and glanced at the cracked viewport. The Runvak was damaged again, scorch marks along its side, flickering lights along its underhull. It wasn't used to this kind of fight. It wasn't used to being challenged. "They'll call for reinforcements soon," Vega said. "So will we," Rourke replied. "And for the first time in history, humanity might actually show up." He didn't know it yet, but halfway across the system, a half-retired dreadnought called the Vanguard was warming up its engines. A Martian war clan had intercepted the signal and were already en route. Even a civilian convoy from Saturn, armed with illegal railguns and an unhealthy amount of rage, was jumping in. The Varnak had awakened something they didn't understand. Not a war machine, not a military force. They'd awakened humanity. The Runvak paused its advance. Not out of fear. It didn't understand that emotion, but confusion. This resistance was illogical. According to its war protocols, species in early galactic stages lacked the ability to respond to overwhelming force. They submitted. They scattered. But the Solus had not only resisted, it had inflicted damage. Worse, more human ships were appearing on long-range scans. Crude by Varnak standards, unorganized and mismatched. But they were coming, and fast. Aboard the Solus, Rourke stood over the command console, eyes bloodshot, face smeared with ash. His voice cracked over the internal comms. "All hands, listen up, we got incoming, friendlies! They're answering the call!" A beat of silence, then cheers, muted by fatigue, grief, but real. It was hope, the kind you taste after you've swallowed nothing but dread. Lieutenant Vega leaned over the display. 3 ships just dropped out of warp, the Vanguard, the Osiris, and, oh God, that's the Iron Widow. That's a Martian War Clan flagship. Rourke grinned through the pain in his side. Tell him the line still holds. Outside, space shimmered as the newcomers fell into formation behind the battered Solus. The Vanguard, twice its size, armed with mass drivers older than Earth's constitution, broadcast a single line on all channels. To whoever's knocking, Earth's not home. Try hell. The Runvak's command AI adjusted its threat assessment. Humans were no longer classified as developing species. They were upgraded to disruptive force. It responded with escalation. From hyperspace, it summoned reinforcements. 2 additional destroyer-class Varnak vessels, sleek, jagged monsters with blood-red cores. Their arrival sent ripples through the stars like a deep growl in the dark. On the Solus, warning sirens howled again. The crew didn't flinch this time. Rourke looked toward the viewport. So, they brought friends. Looks like it's a party, Vega muttered, buckling into her seat. The Iron Widow moved first, breaking formation and blasting toward the closest Varnak destroyer like a missile of rage. Martians had a reputation for being unhinged. They wore their scars like medals, their weapons illegal in every civilized system. They didn't care. They'd seen what the Varnak did to a settlement near Ceres, burned it from orbit, no survivors. The Martians hadn't forgotten. They never did. The clash was chaos. Lasers lit up the void. Metal screamed and exploded in silence. The Osiris flanked left, peppering the second destroyer with railgun slugs. The Vanguard unleashed a volley of fusion torpedoes that punched holes through enemy shielding. And still, in the middle of it all, holding the front like a stubborn ghost, stood the Solus. Half dead, leaking coolant but unmoving. They're focusing on us again, Vega called. That cruiser wants us gone. It's ignoring the others. Because we embarrassed it, Rourke muttered. Good. Let's piss it off some more. He keyed into engineering. How's my cannon, Voss? Chief Voss coughed through static. Held together by spit duct tape and a prayer to Newton, sir. That's enough. The fusion lance hadn't been fired since the first volley. Now it hummed with a soft, threatening glow. Rourke narrowed his eyes at the Runvak on screen. Line it up. I want to punch through its eye socket. As the Solus maneuvered, dodging plasma bolts with sluggish grace, the crew felt something shift. They weren't prey anymore. They were the anchor, the symbol. Other human ships were arriving, smaller vessels, armed freighters, even a damn asteroid tug with explosives strapped to its side. Humanity wasn't organized, but they were relentless, angry, united. In a galaxy used to folding civilizations like napkins, this didn't make sense. But that's what made humans dangerous. They didn't follow the script. The Solus reached firing position. Rourke stood, one hand on the control. Fire. The fusion lance unleashed a beam of raw energy, slicing across the stars and tearing into the Runvak's forward hull. Armor buckled. The beam didn't destroy the ship, but it hurt it. Again. The Varnak couldn't understand why this kept happening. Neither could the stars, but every human watching the feed from Earth, Mars, and beyond knew the answer. Because that's what we do. We hold the line. A groan rippled through the Solus as the fusion lance overheated. Lights dimmed, panels sparked, and a small explosion rocked the lower engine bay. But the crew stayed at their stations. They had crossed a threshold now. Past fear, past survival. What kept them going wasn't orders. It was vengeance, pride, the need to show the galaxy that humanity, battered and scattered, would not be erased without a scream. Outside, the Runvak reeled from the blast. Its forward plating was scarred and molten. The Varnak captain, if it could be called that, reeled back from the input streams. Its neural interface was flooded with confusion. Why hadn't the Solus died? Why had it struck back harder? Varnak culture had no word for perseverance. Inside the human fleet, chaos found rhythm. The vanguard circled wide, drawing fire from the destroyers. The Iron Widow had lost half its plating but continued to hammer its target with relentless precision, Martian war chants blaring across the comms. And the Solus? Still leading. Captain Rourke didn't sit anymore. He paced the bridge like a caged animal, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the screens. Sweat dripped from his temple. "Status on the Runvak?" "Badly damaged, sir," Vega replied. "Its primary weapons are still online, but its shields are dropping below 30%. "Then we're not done yet." The Varnak weren't used to fighting enemies that kept attacking after their own ship started falling apart. Their destroyers shifted tactics, attempting to break through the flanks and hit the Earthbound colonies directly. But they didn't get far, because now humanity wasn't just reacting, they were retaliating. From Saturn, a convoy of mining vessels entered the fight, loaded with makeshift warheads built from drilling charges. They weren't military grade, but they didn't have to be. They swarmed the Varnak flank like hornets, slamming into armor, ripping holes through cruisers piece by piece. On Earth, the broadcast was everywhere. Schools shut down, traffic stopped. No one spoke. Everyone just watched this one, ragged ship still holding point, still refusing to move aside. The Solus, a symbol. "Captain," Vega called, eyes wide. "We're getting a transmission from Earth Defense Command." Rourke raised an eyebrow. About time they joined the conversation. "Put it through." A voice came through, distorted but urgent. "Captain Rourke, this is General Elena Corvinus. You've bought us hours we didn't have. Reinforcements are en route. Heavy cruisers, destroyer support, ETA 20 minutes. Can you hold?" He smiled, voice low and firm. "We've been holding. Just get here before we run out of ship." Cheers broke out across the bridge. Not loud, not wild, just tight, hard claps of relief. They weren't alone anymore. But 20 minutes was still 20 minutes. And the Runvak wasn't giving up. It powered forward, cutting through the void like a wounded beast on a killing run. Plasma turrets lit up, carving through the mining convoy, vaporizing 2 ships in seconds. One destroyer exploded, taking a section of Martian fighters with it. The Iron Widow limped back, engines flickering. The human line faltered. On the Solus, Lieutenant Vega shouted, "We've got a breach on Deck 6. Hull integrity failing." "Seal it off," Rourke barked. "Emergency pressure lock. Reroute coolant to the main engine core. We're going to ram if we have to." "Captain," Vega started, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "If we die loud." The crew braced. The Solus turned. One last charge, one last scream in the face of extinction, and just as the ship's engines surged forward, ready to go out in fire, the stars behind them lit up. 3 Earth cruisers dropped from warp. The Dauntless, the Erebus, and the Pillar of Autumn, massive, hulking beasts of war, guns charged and aimed. Rourke laughed, breathless. "You're late." The Dauntless fired first. Twin plasma mortars slammed into the Runvak, splitting its flank. The Pillar of Autumn followed, battering the remaining destroyer until it cracked open like a steel egg. The line didn't break. The line surged forward. The battlefield transformed the moment Earth's warships entered the fray. Where there was chaos, now came coordination. Where there was desperation, now surged fury. The Dauntless led the charge, its massive dorsal cannon firing volley after volley into the Varnak line. The soundless impact of its shots in space was a kind of poetry, beautiful, brutal, and exact. The Erebus followed on its flank, peeling off enemy fire like it was swatting flies, its shield system centuries ahead of what the Solus could manage. But no ship, not even these giants, drew more eyes than the Solus. Scorched, lopsided. One engine barely holding together, and still holding the line like it was tethered to history itself. Captain Rourke stood in silence, arms crossed as the human fleet unleashed hell. He didn't smile. Not yet. "We got comms from the Pillar of Autumn," Vega said, breathless. "Admiral Dreyfus wants to speak directly." "Tell him to hold," Rourke replied, still staring out the cracked viewport. "We've got unfinished business." The Runvak was retreating, bleeding sparks and core fluid from gaping wounds across its hull. The pride of the Varnak fleet, their conqueror of stars, was in full reverse, shield generators flickering like dying candles. But Rourke wasn't going to let it get away. Not after all this. He turned to Vega, voice low and cold. "That thing torched colonies, burned our people alive. If it leaves, it'll come back with an armada. We end it now." Vega didn't argue. She just nodded. Engineering was a wreck. Voss coughed through the fumes on comms, his voice ragged. "Captain, she's barely hanging together. One more push might rip us in half." "I know," Rourke said. "That's why you'll need to time it perfectly." The plan was madness. No backup strategy. No escape pods ready. Just raw force and a very precise detonation. They were going to ride straight into the Runvak's weakened flank and set off every last warhead on the Solus, manually triggered, point blank, where the cruiser's shield matrix was already failing. It was suicide. But Rourke didn't care. He sent a fleet-wide transmission. "All ships, stand clear of the Solus. We're making one final pass. Admiral, if we don't make it out, finish the job." For a brief moment, silence reigned. Then the Dauntless cut its engines and pulled back, clearing a path. The Solus turned, broken nose pointing directly at the Varnak war cruiser. The stars shimmered behind it, and the fire of vengeance burned ahead. Inside the Runvak, panic stirred, mechanical, calculated, yet real. The humans weren't retreating. The logic array scrambled to make sense of it. Species under threat did not accelerate toward death, but humans did. The Solus went full burn, every engine screaming. Hull plating tore loose from the pressure. Fire erupted on 2 decks. The bridge lights died. Systems went dark. Still, the ship moved forward. The Varnak cruiser tried to turn away. Too slow. Rourke stood at the manual detonation panel, key in hand. Vega strapped herself to the railing, her voice steady but wet with tears. "See you on the other side, Captain." He looked at her, then at the panel, and inserted the key. And then, just as his hand hovered over the trigger. "This is the Erebus! Hold your fire! The Runvak is venting core! It's done, Rourke! You broke its spine!" He froze. On the screen, the massive cruiser shuddered. Its central engine flared, then collapsed inward. Blue light surged down its body, a cascade of uncontrolled overloads. The Runvak didn't explode. It crumbled. Piece by piece, like a dying star, it broke apart into silence and dust. No detonation needed. The Solus stopped short, less than 500 meters from the remains. Barely alive. The crew sat in silence. Then cheers, sobs, screams of exhausted relief. Captain Rourke stepped away from the panel, legs weak, breathing shallow. "Cancel the fireworks," he muttered. "I'm getting too old for martyrdom." And just like that, humanity had done the impossible. They hadn't just survived. They had held the line and broken the invincible. The debris from the Runvak floated across the void like drifting bones of a fallen god. For the first time in living memory, a Varnak cruiser had been destroyed. Not by a superior force, not by advanced tech, but by what the Varnak once called a primitive species. And worse, by a single ship that should have never survived the first salvo. The Solus was towed back to the outer orbit of Titan by the Pillar of Autumn, its hull sparking, engines silent, but its name now burned into history. Every newsfeed across the colonies replayed the footage. The last charge, the crumbling Runvak, the battered ship refusing to die. Captain Elijah Rourke, broken ribs and all, walked down the ramp as the docking bay hissed open, the gravity plating humming beneath his feet. His uniform was scorched, eyes red, knuckles bloodied. But he stood tall. He was greeted not by fanfare, not by generals, but by silence and a sea of eyes. Engineers, soldiers, medics, civilians who had risked everything to get the message out. Survivors, believers. The silence held for a beat, then applause. Not polite, not rehearsed. It exploded through the hangar like a war cry, echoing off every wall, building in waves until even Rourke, tired, scarred, had to close his eyes and take a shaky breath. But not everyone was cheering. In the command tower above the dock, General Elena Corvinus watched the scene with folded arms and a scowl. She hadn't wanted this. Heroes made people harder to control. She turned to her aide. Has EarthGov authorized an official commendation? They're debating it, the aide said carefully. The Solus acted without formal clearance. They're discussing protocol breaches, collateral loss, unauthorized combat engagement. Bullshit, Corvinus snapped. They want to downplay him before he becomes a symbol they can't manage. And he was a symbol now. Across Mars, graffiti read, "Hold the line." On Earth, children played games pretending to be Captain Rourke of the Solus. On Europa, a woman kissed a photo of her dead brother who had died aboard the Solus and whispered, "You stopped them." But far beyond the outer colonies, in the deep, cold stretches of space, the Varnak were not mourning. They were watching. The shattered Runvak had broadcast its last moments to the Empire before it died. The footage, corrupted and glitchy, still showed what mattered. A human ship, defiant to the end, refusing to move. The Varnak's high executor watched the loop over and over, his claws twitching in irritation. A dozen warlords debated in their native tongue. Sibilant, guttural, hateful. They did not mourn the loss of a ship. They mourned the loss of certainty. The humans had disrupted the order of things. This was not a resistance. This was infection. And the Varnak only had one answer to infection: extermination. Send the writ of retaliation, the High Executor hissed. The humans are no longer to be studied or monitored. They are to be erased. All of them. Back in Sol's system, Earth's political council scrambled. Half the senators wanted to negotiate, believing that diplomacy could still stop a war. The other half demanded rearmament. And then there was the new faction. Young, militant, inspired by Rourke. Colonists, engineers, smugglers, ex-soldiers, and students. They didn't wait for governments. They organized online, calling themselves the Solus Legion. They pledged to defend humanity by any means, with or without permission. They wore patches stitched with one phrase: "We hold the line." Rourke didn't want fame. He didn't want politics. But in the aftermath, as medals were tossed at him like apologies, he realized something. This wasn't the end. The Varnak would return. And next time, they wouldn't underestimate humanity. 3 weeks passed since the battle. The Solus, barely a ship anymore, more like a floating coffin wrapped in legend, rested in dry dock above Mars. Engineers swarmed over it like ants on a dying tree, debating whether to scrap or preserve it. Politicians wanted it as a museum piece. Soldiers wanted it reforged into something deadlier. But the people? The people wanted it remembered exactly how it was. Wounded, but undefeated. Captain Elijah Rourke sat alone in a hospital wing at Armstrong Base, half his ribs still wrapped, one lung recovering from vacuum exposure. The room was quiet, clean, lifeless, the kind of sterile peace that made him itch. A soft knock broke the silence. He didn't turn. Doors open. Lieutenant Vega stepped in, her arm still in a sling, a slight limp in her walk. She looked tired, but sharper somehow, hardened. They hadn't spoken much since the battle. Everyone had been scattered across fleets, councils, briefings. The system was still spinning. "You're alive," she said, walking in and dropping a bag of lukewarm Martian coffee on the side table. "Regrettably," he grunted. "They fixed me up so I could sit in more goddamn interviews." She chuckled. "The admirals love you now. You're a propaganda machine." "Yeah? Let them put them in a ship held together with chewing gum and spite next time." He sipped the bitter drink and leaned back, groaning as his ribs protested. "EarthGov's splitting," she said after a moment. "Half want to prepare for war. Half think we should beg for peace." "They won't get peace," Rourke said quietly. "Not after what we did. Not after the Runvak. They're calling it a fluke." He turned, meeting her eyes. "We humiliated them, Vega. And humiliation for an empire like that? It's like blood in the water. They have to answer it. They'll come back." She nodded. "I think they already have." She tossed a data chip onto his tray. "Intercepted signals. Fringe colonies have gone dark. No word from Talon's Reach. A freighter limped into Europa orbit with half its hull gone. Pilot swears it was a Varnak scout wing. Small, fast, testing the outer lines." Rourke clenched his jaw. "Recon before the hammer. And EarthGov's too busy debating budget logistics and treaty wording. They're not ready. We're not ready." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the med-equipment the only sound between them. Then Vega leaned in. "I want to rebuild the Solace." Rourke blinked. "Rebuild?" "Not restore, not preserve. Rebuild. Make her stronger, smarter, faster, but keep the soul of her. Keep what made her ours." He looked at her for a long time. "They won't authorize that," she smirked. "Already started. The Solus Legion has engineers volunteering from all over, even Martian tech smiths. Half of them used to be criminals. Other half probably still are." He couldn't help but smile. Damn pirates are finally good for something. Vega leaned forward, more serious now. "We can't wait for EarthGov to decide who we are. We already showed the galaxy who we are. Now we need to be ready to show them again. Bigger." Rourke nodded slowly. "You get the ship. I'll get the crew." Far across space, in a cold void known only as Sector 9-5 Tau, the Varnak War Council convened in darkness. Their language was jagged, aggressive, filled with clicks and growls that sounded like metal grinding against bone. But in that massive, torch-lit chamber, no voices were raised, only the hiss of strategy. A new campaign had been approved, not for conquest, for annihilation. The Sol system was to be erased, not subjugated, not studied, not spared. An overseer drone skittered forward, projecting a distorted image of the Solus, damaged, glowing, firing into the Runvak before it collapsed. One of the Varnak warlords snapped his claw against the stone floor, hard enough to crack it. "They remember the name," the translator bot whispered into Terran Standard. "We will burn it from their memory." 30 Varnak destroyers were activated, 5 command dreadnoughts, 1 World Killer class siege engine. They were not coming to fight Earth. They were coming to cleanse it. On Earth, Rourke stood in front of a growing crowd on the launch platform at Luna Prime. He hated speeches, hated politics. But this one mattered. Behind him, the Solus hung suspended in scaffold beams, still missing entire plates of armor. But beneath the broken frame, engines had been replaced, weapons upgraded. She had a new core, and a new name: Solus Requiem. Rourke stepped forward, gripping the rail. "I don't have a speech," he said, voice echoing through the dome. "I don't have quotes from dead leaders or fancy slogans." He looked at the crowd. Martians, Earthers, Jovians, colonists, soldiers, even pirates. "All I have is what I saw." He paused, took a breath. "I saw us holding the line when everyone thought we'd run. I saw us bleed and burn and break, together. I saw an empire blink, for the first time in centuries, because of one ship and a crew that refused to kneel." He leaned forward, eyes locked on theirs. "They're coming. And next time they won't come for battle. They'll come to wipe us out. And I say we don't give them the chance." The crowd was dead silent. Then someone yelled, "We hold the line!" And another, "We hold the line!" And it grew, a chant, a roar, a wave. Rourke smiled grimly. The line would hold. But this time it wouldn't be one ship. It would be a fleet. The stars looked calm before the end. From the edge of Sol system they appeared as pinpricks of peace, cold, beautiful, distant. But just beyond Pluto's icy grave, hidden in the black, the Varnak armada emerged from the void. It wasn't a fleet, it was a sentence: 30 destroyers, 5 dreadnoughts, and in the middle of them, eclipsing even the light of distant stars, floated the HFYWar, the World Killer. A siege engine older than many planets, capable of turning Earth's crust into vapor. Humanity's last transmission had been simple: "We are still here." And this was the Varnak's answer. Inside the HFYWar's command core, 1 billion nanowires pulsed across the neural chamber, feeding information directly into the overmind. It wasn't a being. It was vengeance, encoded and sentient. The Varnak didn't want prisoners. They didn't want surrender. They wanted to make an example. But this time, Earth was waiting. Near Saturn's orbit, the newly born Solus Requiem hummed with power, stronger, sleeker, still scarred with the memory of its last stand. But now, reborn as a war machine crafted by unity, rage, and defiance. Captain Elijah Rourke sat in the command chair, every nerve alight. His bones still ached from the last fight. His mind still carried the ghosts of the ones they lost. But his heart was ready. "All ships, report in," Vega called out, seated at his right, her voice cutting through the static like fire. One by one they came online. The Vanguard, Iron Widow, Osiris, Pillar of Autumn, then dozens more. Ships that hadn't existed weeks ago. Civilian convoys now armed with warheads. Retired freighters converted into missile barges. Even a few black market stealth rigs, their crews grinning like wolves in the dark. The Solus Legion was no longer a symbol. It was an army. Rourke rose slowly, his voice steady on the open comm. "Make no mistake, they're not just coming for our worlds, they're coming to erase our existence. They want us forgotten." He looked at every screen, at every crew. "They call this their galaxy. They think we're just an inconvenience. Well, today we remind them who the real problem is." A pause. "Today we hold the line again." He sat, and space exploded. The first wave hit like a tsunami of light and metal. Varnak destroyers surged forward, firing plasma lances and quantum disruptors, tearing into the human formation with ruthless precision. The Iron Widow took the brunt, its Martian hull groaning but unbroken. The Osiris launched counterstrike missiles, saturating the dark with clouds of flame. For every human ship that fell, another surged into its place. They didn't scatter. They didn't retreat. They pushed. The Solus Requiem was everywhere. Rourke drove it like a blade between ribs, weaving through enemy fire, targeting weak points, smashing apart 2 destroyers in the first 5 minutes of battle. Her fusion lance now fired in precise bursts, each one tearing through enemy armor like paper. But then came the HFYWar. A single pulse from its central cannon sliced through space and vaporized 3 ships instantly. The explosion lit the void, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Vega screamed over comms, "HFYWar is charging for another shot." Rourke didn't blink. "Close the distance. Get under it. That monster was built to break planets, not people." The Solus Requiem burned hard toward the HFYWar, dodging debris and weaving between enemy lines. Other ships followed, Vanguard laying down cover fire, Erebus launching drones in all directions, swarm tactics in full effect. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the dreadnoughts began to move. Not fast, but deliberately, targeting Earth's orbital stations, humanity's heart. Rourke saw it. He felt it in his bones. "They're going for the kill." He opened fleet-wide comms. "All hands, this is it. Every ounce of power, every shot you've got. We take the HFYWar down, or Earth burns." The approach was hell. 3 more human ships exploded before they got within firing range. The Solus shook under direct impact, flames licking the control deck. Vega was bleeding from the temple, and Rourke's hands trembled from a fractured wrist. But they kept going. The final volley was a suicide run. "Target its core," Rourke shouted, "and prep the charge." Vega looked at him. "You're not doing this again." "We don't detonate us, we plant it," he said through gritted teeth. "We're not dying heroes, we're survivors with a vendetta." With the HFYWar's defenses torn open by the combined fire of the Pillar of Autumn and Dauntless, the Solus Requiem plunged into its belly like a dagger. Rourke and Vega personally led a boarding team onto the enemy dreadnought, fighting through Varnak drones and breathing in recycled fire-scorched air. They made it to the core chamber. The thing pulsed like a dark heart. Rourke stared at it, whispered, "Time to return the favor." They planted the fusion bomb, set it to a delayed trigger, and sprinted like hell. Back aboard the Requiem, the engines were barely holding. The crew was running on willpower and adrenaline. The human fleet had fallen back, beaten and broken, but watching. And then, light. The HFYWar detonated from the inside, a slow, swelling bloom of white that lit the stars like a second sun. Varnak systems collapsed instantly. Their dreadnoughts blinked offline. Their formation fell apart. They hadn't just lost a ship. They lost their god. And they ran. For the first time in history, the Varnak retreated. Humanity, scarred, bloodied, half-ruined, stood alone in the ashes of a would-be grave. And once again, across every channel, every world, every tongue, the message went out. The line held. Months later, at a quiet memorial on Earth, they unveiled a statue. Not of a hero, but of a ship. The Solus, carved in burnished stone, aimed forever skyward. Beneath it, the words etched in metal. They came for our extinction. We gave them resistance. And when all seemed lost, we held the line. Rourke stood nearby, older now, still healing. But when children ran past and saluted the statue, he allowed himself one small smile. Because he knew. The galaxy would never forget Earth again.